Jack, for choir's sake, put another mic on a stand over there. Welcome to Grace Baptist Church. If you'll take your hymn books and turn to hymn number 14. Hymn number 14. Everyone standing, please, as you're able. Hymn number 14. Kneel at the cross. Looking forward to doing that today. Hymn number 14. Kneel at the cross, Christ will meet you there. Come while he waits for you. Listen to his voice, leave with him your care, and begin life anew. Kneel at the cross, leave every care. Kneel at the cross, Jesus will meet you there. Kneel at the cross, there is room for all who would his glory share. Bliss there awaits, harm can ne'er befall those who are anchored there. Kneel at the cross, leave every care. Kneel at the cross, Jesus will meet you there. Kneel at the cross, give your idols up, look unto realms above. Turn not away to thy sparkling cup, trust only in his love. Kneel at the cross, leave every care. Kneel at the cross, Jesus will meet you there. Good singing this morning. Mr. Crosgrove, would you open our service in prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this beautiful day of divine course. Thank you for this building that we can come to honor and praise you. We pray that you'll bless this church, Lord, and be able to use the message we hear today, Lord, in our everyday lives. We thank you for who you are and what you've done for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. You may be seated. Children, I dismissed your Sunday school classes, except for the teenagers. You're down with us today. All right. Is this thing on? I might have to what? Turn it on? Trying again. Is it on now? No, it's definitely the power button. Although I turned it. Oh, okay. It's a 2-button safety system on this. It's got a power button and a mute button, which is good. I'll tell you, I've heard a lot of accidental stuff over hot mics, so I'm glad for the mute button. Yeah. See now, but the hard part was tucking this back behind my belt. And there's that now. All right. Good morning. Glad to have you with us this morning. And this is one of those things where this morning I'm a little bit off kilter. One, I did not anticipate teaching adults. I find adults, well, scary, versus teaching the teens. But I do enjoy getting to do that. We're going over service in the teen class, what service is. That's, I get a little bit of a clue as to how much I scare you guys sometimes. But so we're going to be talking about service today. I tell you, I'm off kilter because I wasn't expecting it. I'm off kilter because I don't have my preaching Bible. I had a Bible given to me when I was 12 years old by my parents. I've used it since then. It's falling apart now, so I keep it at the church, and I use it to study when I'm upstairs. I use it to preach when I'm doing something somewhere, and it's not here. No, that's all right. We will find a way. John is currently searching and trying, and he will find it, I'm sure. I do not understand. Maybe in all the craziness of VBS setup, we moved something where it was. I'm not sure, but I was like, I just don't know what to do without that Bible. I'm telling you, that's why I use it. I've used it since I was 12. 17 years of use. It's just know where everything is, how it's laid out. So until then, I will use iPad Bible, and hopefully that turns up before Sunday morning. Isaiah 6:5 is the adult memory verse for the month. We can go over that real quick. And then teenagers, you know what your verse is. So, and if you're not sure, we're in trouble. Go upstairs. It is in the top left corner of the chalkboard. Don't go now. Afterwards. You've got to be very careful, teenagers. They take you very literally. Go after. And then we can enjoy that. Isaiah 6:5 is the adult verse. We'll go over that real quick. And how is your all's week? I heard it one great. That's good. It's all right. It's okay. No, it's all right. Isaiah 6:5. It says, "Then said I, woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Let's say it together, even the teenagers. Yes, you can participate. Isaiah 6:5. "Then said I, woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." Work on 6:5. Yes, I guess the adults have that to work on for the next couple weeks. I think there's 2 more weeks left. It's a 5-Sunday month, so that's a good one to memorize. Love that passage in general. Verse 8 is the more famous of them, but verse 5 is a good reality, and it works well with, okay, Pastor says he found it. Apparently it made its way back to my house, which is not supposed to happen. All right. Don't know who could have done that. Someone. All right. So, like I said, we will be in Romans 6, verse 16. We're actually going to be all over the place. No, today, we're going to hold off on our verse. Romans chapter 6 will be in verse 16 to start. We're talking about service. There's a few principles. We're going to go review what we did last week, teenagers. Some of you who weren't here, so that's not a bad thing. The others probably need a refresher. The average person, to learn something, it takes 7 times of repetition before you actually learn it. Average person. Now, I am well below average, so I can always use a little bit of extra refreshment. So we will definitely take a little refresher course on what service is. And we will go to Romans chapter 6, verse 16. It says, "Know ye not that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants ye are to whom ye obey? whether it's of sin unto death or of obedience unto righteousness. Now this makes sense on a lot of levels. In servants, you know who they belong to in that they obey their master, right? You don't get away with disobeying your master. It doesn't happen. Keep in mind the concept of their service is still, it's both Roman and Judaism at this point in the culture of that it is being talked about. The Judaism is if you fell into debt, you would become a bondservant to them. And at the end of your debt, you would be then able to choose whether you wanted to remain a servant or not. Why would you ever want to remain a servant, you say? Well, that would be the choice of your choice because, one, you did such a great job on your own the last time you got into debt to where you had to be in this mess. And two, if they treated you really well, which they had reason to do, then you could also choose to remain a slave. Now, they signified that. Anybody remember how they signified that you were a slave for life after that? They put your ear on a doorpost and they drove an awl through it, and then they put a ring in that, and that was your mark that you were a slave for life. And so servant, we're talking about servants here, and how you know whether you're a servant to sin or a servant unto righteousness. Now, a servant of righteousness, who do you think your master is if you're doing things that are righteous? You're serving God. Now, when you go to, if you're a servant and doing sin, the Bible tells you you're of your father the devil. Oh, man, that's kind of harsh, isn't it? You know? I always laugh when there's a child, normally fairly young. Thank you. When there is a child that is fairly young and does something that is embarrassing, and then the parents look at each other and says, "That's your son," and that characteristic makes them more like the father or more like the mother. My sister is a little bit of a klutz, so if it's something that's klutzy, then Chris will look at her and say, "That's your kid." And if it's something annoying, and because Chris has that tendency to just pick and pick at people and be a little bit obnoxious at times, and if they do something like that, or if they just Elizabeth will look, that's your child right there. And it's, funny to watch and humorous to watch and see that. But in this regards, your actions are what tell somebody whether you are, it's identifying as a child of God or a child of sin. Now, does that make you, if you have accepted Christ, your actions do not make you that person. Okay? So if you've accepted Christ, you can no longer be of your father the devil, because he's no longer your father. Okay? Christ has redeemed you. But you're acting like one of his children. You are acting like one of his servants in how you sow discord. You are acting like one of his children in how you are behaving in your life. And it says, "But God be thanked that ye were the servants of sin, but ye have obeyed from the heart that from the doctrine which was delivered you. Being then made free from sin, ye became servants of righteousness." So he's addressing this. "I speak after the manner of men because of the infirmity of your flesh. For as ye have yielded your members servants to uncleanness and to iniquity unto iniquity, even so now yield your members servants to righteousness unto holiness." So, get this. He's explaining this process. He's saying, listen, you're no longer the slave to sin. You're no longer the slave to the devil. You are now a child of God, so now you need to serve the one who bought you. You say he bought us. Yes, he did. Romans, going to switch over to this in my notes now. Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable, get this, service. And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and perfect and acceptable will of God. So basically, he's telling us that we are that we are to our reasonable service is to present our bodies a living sacrifice. I remember when for those of you, I'm really not happy with NFL right now. Just stupid stuff. I found out this week that they're going to have a recording of the national anthem played before because they don't want to bring entertainers in and potentially get people infected with the virus. The caution, okay, maybe that's a good precaution. But then they're going to bring entertainers in to sing, lift every voice and sing. And I'm like, one, either have that same person get up and sing the national anthem since they're already there, or two, just play canned music for both of them. But that's it's silliness in this. If that's your reason for not bringing in an entertainer, you really should keep that as a standard that you live by. I just hate the hypocrisy. Right. But anyway, moving on from there. I remember when Cam Newton came out into to there. He was a football player, quarterback, #1 overall draft pick, and he was a fairly clean dude as far as his appearance. He wears some eccentric stuff. I mean, crazy, wild stuff. But he had no tattoos, nothing like that. And his owner walked up to him one day in his rookie year, after he was doing really well. His rookie season did really well for a rookie. And he walked up to him and said, "Do you have any tattoos?" He said, "No, sir, I don't." He said, "As long as you play for me, you're not to have any." Now, did everyone on the team follow that, get that same guideline? No. But he was then the face of that franchise. And as long as he had none at that time, he was telling him, "You're not to get one." You say, what? It's his body, his choice, right? Not when you're being paid by your boss, and your boss says no. He had a different standard, a different contract that he had to live up to. And that goes for us when you see it. And he didn't complain about that, by the way. Why? He understood. This is my service for being there. And incidentally, he's no longer with the team, and he still hasn't gotten any, and it's probably just a personal preference at this point not to have them. But he followed that, even though as a young kid, a lot of guys, they go crazy when they get their first check and do some crazy things. But he has upheld that, which is good. Luke chapter 22. Luke chapter 22. Going to go through some concepts of service. Again, on the concept of being bought. What, know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God, and ye are not your own? For ye are bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. So, when you are bought with a price, what was the price? Jesus Christ dying on the cross. When you have accepted Jesus Christ as your Savior, you are now a bought servant. You are. Before, you had chose by our sin nature to be a servant of sin. Because we continually and habitually do things that are wrong, we are the servant of sin and condemned to death. But when Jesus Christ died on the cross, He gave us the opportunity to choose to be bought by Him. And when He bought us, now He's saying, your reasonable service is living for me and choosing to serve the righteousness instead of the sin that you used to serve. Luke 22, verse 27. For whether is greater, he that sitteth at meat or he that serveth? Is not he that sitteth at meat, but I am among you as he that serveth. I want you to get a note in our minds. We just don't. When we picture servants, we're picturing southern plantation servants. It's American mindset. We're picturing this. Keep that out of your mind. Okay? This is not the context that any of this is talking about. What this is talking about is a service that was not as distorted. Sure, there was probably bad masters back in the days of the Bible. I'm sure there were. But it was nothing to what you're seeing, that you saw down south. And I will say that that wasn't true of all of them either. Moving on. Luke 22:27. So Jesus is saying, for whether is greater, he that sitteth at meat or he that serveth? Who's the greater person? Now, if you go to, I remember the Lobelines, they went on that cruise, was it last fall or something like that for the wedding? You went, yeah, and they went and they talked about their servers. They talked about them because when they were there, they said that they were really good, right? And they had to serve for or work for a few years on land before they'd ever be put on the cruise, and they were constantly there on top of everything from what they were allowed to eat and what they weren't allowed to eat based on dietary concerns. But they were constantly on top of it, and they did a really awesome job. And when you look at that and you say, well, who is the more important person? The person who they are serving or the person that is serving? Now, in our human mindset, almost always you'll look at a fine restaurant and you're not impressed by the person who's the waiter. You're impressed by the person that's sitting at that table, right? For one reason or another, he's earned enough to where he's there. He's able to eat there. He's able to spend that money at that place, and you say that's impressive. We look at the guy that drives the nicest car. No, not talking about the Corvette necessarily. But you see somebody driving a Lambo, or I had a guy pull up that had a '64 Evinrude boat. It has this glass. It was really weird and really awesome. If you want to see a picture, I took one. But he has it all done up. He redid it in Ferrari. So it's Ferrari red with a Ferrari symbol, Ferrari lettering, got a Ferrari steering wheel. It was really cool. But you look at this thing, and it's weird. And I'm impressed. And I know the guy owns a lot of cars and other stuff also. It's really cool to look at. And so you can look at that and be impressed when he goes and he sits down someplace and be like, he is in our establishment. I'll never forget once I was working at this fruit stand, and Michelle Brooks came by one day to buy some vegetables, and I had just gotten slammed for the last 2 hours. There I was at you're supposed to set things out neatly, and then when a box is empty, you stack it neatly over here. And that's how you're supposed to do it. But when you're by yourself and you have nonstop business and there's no time to recover, it doesn't become quite so neat. Anyone ever been there where it's like you're supposed to? Yeah, it all of a sudden becomes a little hectic. And so I had my box fell over actually. Boxes fell over actually as she walked up. Perfect. I had no corn on the top yet because I just hadn't had time to throw one back on. I was just grabbing it from the bags, and it was just kind of crazy as to how it worked out. And I'll never forget her coming up, and she bought some stuff from us. And I thought to myself, how embarrassing. I'm a mess. I'm waiting on Michelle Brooks. I think she was just a representative at that time. I don't believe she was. I think she's a state senator now. Oh, not a representative, but she was just a representative at that time. And it's this is embarrassing. Because I'm thinking about who I'm serving. Well, in our minds, that just is how we compute. If it's somebody important, we want to take care of them, right? But Jesus is saying, and he's putting us in the reverse mindset, where he says, is not he that sitteth at meat, but I am among you as he that serveth. You see, Jesus did not come as the important person to be the one that, hey, Jesus is at my house. And yes, Martha still ran around like crazy trying to make sure everything was just right. But that was not what he wanted. He's looking to be just the person that would serve. He demonstrates this many times over and over. Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2, verse 7 says, but made himself, we'll go with verse 5. Let this mind be also in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. This was Christ's mindset. Who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God. Being equal with God, this was his mind. But made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. So he humbles himself and took upon him the form of a servant, and was as a man. Jesus did not come to be a ruler. Didn't come to be a ruler. One day he will become to be the ruler of everything. The King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Prince of Peace. All of these great things. And I look forward to that day. But as of right now, Christ is here. Christ comes, and he comes to be a servant. John chapter 13. Great example of this. I talked to the kids about this especially last time. Last time we went over this. John chapter 13, verse 12. You know, there are two ordinances of the church. We have communion. We have the baptism. But there is one that some would say is a third. This is it. It is not. All right? It is not. Do not make this is something that Jesus did not intend it to be. But John chapter 13, and praise the Lord for that, by the way. John chapter 13, verse 12. So after he had washed their feet. So he has washed their feet when he's talking about whose feet is he washing? He is washing the disciples' feet. This is Jesus washing the disciples' feet. How nasty that would be. You talk about some guys, you're not talking about guys that are used to upper privilege, most of them. Matthew, who maybe because he was a tax collector, would have lived a little higher on the hog than the rest of them. But the rest of them were pretty much not going to have much wealth beforehand. Just weren't. Fishermen are not exactly the cleanest of people. They're not. Listen, they did not build boats back then that had restrooms on them. There's just not many things that you can do when you're on a boat. They worked around dead fish and fish that they wanted to be dead. This is just the way that it worked. Guts, slime, filth. They did not work in clean environments. Now, can you understand somebody that has been used to a luxurious lifestyle is probably going to take care of themselves a little bit better just because of the nature of the fact that that's what they're used to, and how unsanitary. Put Matthew out on a boat, he might not be in place. But you're dealing with these people that have been walking around in the dirt, in the desert, wearing sandals typically of the day. Sandals, I don't know about you, but I've worn them on the beach. I've worn them around. I used to wear a hiking sandal, if there is such a thing. Not flip-flops. Those things are useless. But I used to wear one that was similar to what they would have worn back then. And I'd play basketball. I'd do whatever in it. And no matter what activity I was doing, my feet were always dirty afterwards. Just no way around it. It's open, your feet gets all the dust and grime from the day. Jesus is washing those feet. Now, I'll tell you, I work with a lot of teenagers. I can't tell you any of them that I'd be willing to wash their feet. And then he looks at them and he says, "No," in verse 12, "Know ye what I have done to you?" In John chapter 13, verse 12, "Know ye what I have done to you?" And the teenagers would say, "Hey, something very strange. Not right, don't touch my feet. Ye call me Master and Lord, and ye say, well, for so I am." I am the Master. I am the one that is teaching you. I am the one that is training you. You've been walking around with me for a while now. And you're calling me master because that is my position in our relationship. If I then, verse 14, if I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. Now, again, this is where people take it out of context and say, see, we should be washing each other's feet. No. That's not what he's saying. Not what he's saying at all. It's not the practice of washing feet. If we made this something, then we would be no better than the Pharisees who take the laws of Moses and say, this is what you've got to do to be right with God. Okay? Why do we do communion? Because we are obeying him in that he said to do it, one. But two, because it is to remember what Jesus did for us. It is not the act itself that is special. It is the act of remembering what Jesus did for us that makes it special. Why do we do baptism? Not because the baptism act itself is sacred. We do it because it is a picture of what Jesus did for us and a symbol that we are not going to live that way anymore. I know there is a symbolism to washing your feet, washing off the grime of this world, right? But it's not the same as the other two. The two are remembering what Christ did for us. This one is very simply, would be just a picture of us washing off our getting rid of the grime that we are around in this world. That's not the same thing. You cannot say that this is something that he told us to do as a continual thing. Not anywhere near the same. And it's nasty. For I have given you an example that ye should do as I have done to you. And you say, see, he even said we're supposed to do it. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither he that sent greater than he that sent me. If ye know these things, happy are ye if ye do them. What is he telling them when he says do this? He's telling them, serve ye one another. Defraud ye not one another. He's telling them, make sure that you are serving one another, esteeming other better than themselves. You know, we're supposed to make sure that we are not putting our priorities over someone else's and other brothers. We're supposed to making sure that we are willing to serve each other, because none of us are greater than the other. He also gives us the concept of when you're in a position of leadership, you are a servant still to everyone that works underneath you. Just ask any boss that is worth his salt about the responsibility he feels to his employees. Making sure that they have a job, making sure that they have a means to take care of their family. It's a heavy responsibility. Anyone that's worth their salt knows that it's not just them serving you and not caring about what happens other than that. It's I'm serving them and I have the responsibility to make sure that I take care of these guys. Luke chapter 17. Almost done. 3 more passages. Verse 10, Luke 17, verse 10 says, So likewise ye, when ye shall have done all those things which are commanded, you say, We are unprofitable servants. We have done that which was our duty to do. I want you to keep this in mind, because this is when not only are leaders servants, so the pastor is a servant to us. You say, oh, goody. No. 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 Remember, we're supposed to do this one to another. He is a servant in that he is responsible for us. He is the shepherd of the church. He is supposed to take care of this flock that God has given him. And that does not mean he is your personal masseuse. He is not. And when we do something, we're not supposed to be jumping up and say, oh, look what I just did. I hate that. Anybody know that person, the glory hound, that they do 1/10 of what you do. But everybody knows that 10th because they tell them everything. And what did you do today? And it's like, I did 10 times more than that guy. I just didn't tell you about it. Anybody know that feeling from...
It's kind of frustrating, is it not? And you want to say, do you want to get a list? We can start comparing. But you're a good person, and so you don't do that. And the reality of the situation is we're not supposed to do that. When you are paid, I get this a lot at work. You get paid, we hired on at, say, if you got hired on and say at $9 an hour. And then I had one guy get hired at $9 an hour or something like that, somewhere in that range. And then he walks in his first day on work. First day. He's talking to customers, right? And he makes the comment that at the rate they pay me, it's a good thing that I'm even wearing pants today. First day on the job. He's already complaining about the wage he agreed to a few days ago? Now listen, when you hire on to work for such an amount, that's what you hired on for. It's one reason why I'm never really disappointed with a raise. Work, if you're watching, I'm not really disappointed with the raise because I hired on at this amount. You're giving me more than what I agreed to. Now, granted, I would like it to stay above what the cost of living goes up, but that's kind of more just going along with the agreement that we had. You know, this was the cost of living, this is what you said to pay. As cost of living goes up, you just keep steady with what I agreed to, right? That makes sense. But anything above that is just like, well, that's awesome. And what people complain about, I only got, listen, we agreed to work for this rate. Now, if you want out of that contract, you're more than welcome to get out of that contract and agree to work for someone else for that amount. But when you are a servant and you're told to do a job, you don't complain about the job that you're doing or the rate that you're being paid. Because that's what you're paid to do. If you talk to a soldier who performs an extraordinary act, Alvin York, Sergeant York, some of you might have watched that movie with Gary Cooper or way back in the day. Some of you look at me and like, who is Gary Cooper? You look and you hear about these guys, Audie Murphy, some of these guys that are the most decorated, I believe Sergeant York is the most decorated World War I, Audie Murphy of all time, right? I believe something like most decorated soldiers. If you talk to them about what they did, Audie Murphy, one of the things he did, and he did a lot, was he jumped onto a tank that was burning, and he covered the retreat of his unit with the machine gun mounted on the tank. He's literally the only guy standing in front of the German army, and he returns fire until it runs out, empties his gun until it runs out, empties his service pistol until it runs out. I think he threw grenades. And eventually when he jumped off the tank, it exploded. The people watching would say. And single-handedly covered the retreat, and I think it might have even turned maybe the next day into an advance because of the damage that he did as a one-man wrecking crew on that day. If you'd asked him and wanted about that day, he would not have told you that he did something exceptional. He would tell you he did his duty to help his men. He did his job, what he had been paid to do. It's nothing extraordinary. This is what I was told to do. As Christians, a lot of times when we give up something, we want some credit. We want the old pat on the back because we have done something extraordinary in not doing something. And the reality of the situation is you're a servant of Christ. So not doing sin isn't exceptional. It's reasonable. It's your duty. It is your service. Nothing that is required that gets any showboating. When you go out and go soul winning, by the way, I love it when people go out and go soul winning with us. You should all try and make an attempt at some point to be a witness to the people at least around you for Christ. And in this day and age, we need that. But when we go out soul winning, it's not like we get to go and run laps around the church afterwards because, man, we got to tell 300 people about Christ. We did our duty. You understand? It's not exceptional and now we might be more excited at times because somebody accepted Christ. And that's something to rejoice in, but not because we did it. Because our master did something in somebody's life. That's what we can rejoice about. Not that, man, that guy's a good soul winner. Or that girl's a good soul winner. They didn't do anything. They gave the presentation of the gospel. They were doing what a servant's job was, and God showed up. You see, a servant just does what he knows and is paid and knows is right. Service is not exceptional. It is reasonable. John chapter 13, John chapter 13. We've already read this. A Christian, a servant of God, finds happiness in serving. Finds happiness in serving. You ever see a miserable person? It's somebody that's not working, not doing anything, and wants to be. You know, somebody that wants a purpose in this life and is denied one by the virtue of the fact that they're not doing anything. Okay? If you have a purpose, you want to be serving that purpose. If you've worked in this your whole life and then all of a sudden technology takes it out, your purpose feels a little empty. You understand? Because all of a sudden you can't do the same thing. I feel this way with technology today. I am still on Windows XP, even though we are now past Vista, that tragedy, and Windows 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we're on like, what, 12, 10? It's amazing to me to see all of this, and I feel like my usefulness on the computer is just about nil. Because the technology I learned and got good at, it's way past me now. Way past me. At work, they have, now it's funny because it doesn't work. They now have one screen in the place that is a touch screen. And I'll go to show someone the part and I'll touch the screen because that's what I always do. And it clicks and jumps somewhere else. And it's not accurate. It's like it needs recalibrated. It's like 6 inches off of where I touch that it actually clicks. It's just awful. So I get to laugh at AutoZone for their technology. But you look at these things and you learn these systems and then it changes. And your purpose is like, well, it's frustrating. But in verse 17, if you know these things, happy are ye if you do them. You want to see a miserable person, see a Christian who's not doing what he knows is right. I can't tell you how many Christians, teenagers or otherwise, that have told me that they're doing something they know to be wrong because they feel like it, because it makes them happy for the short term. And then I can't tell you how many of those people at one point, now not all of them because some of them are relatively recent, but at some point they realize they made a mistake and how miserable they are because they realize what they had chosen to do was not serving their master. It was serving the one that they were bought from. Servants realize that they don't deserve any credit. Servants realize that we are serving a loving God that has bought us and redeemed us from a wicked master. And servants find happiness and joy in serving our great God, in doing just what we know is right. This is specifically talking about the area of foot washing. I'm not going to go around smiling if my job was smelling dirty feet. But it's rosy afterward. But I will tell you, I find joy in serving with the young people. I find joy in serving when I get to go to the nursing home and see a smile on somebody's face as we sing a hymn that, now we haven't been able to do that for a while now, unfortunately. But I find joy in being able to serve my master, not because what I'm doing is anything extraordinary, but because I am fulfilling the purpose for which I was redeemed. And I get to see Christ's word, Christ's message, Christ's joy fill their life as they yield to Him. And that's what makes it worth it, guys. Because I'm serving Him, I get to see what He does. It's not what I do, it's what He does. And as long as I keep serving Him, I'll keep to get to see what He does in their life. it's amazing to watch. Now, during VBS, we'll be talking about somebody who served faithfully but didn't see many results in Jeremiah. And so you don't always get to serve and see that joy. I understand that there are some hard times. But a servant finds joy in serving and doing his purpose. And in those days when you're like, I don't have any of that joy, I don't see God doing anything, one, examine, am I actually doing what He wants me to be doing? Because again, if you're not doing anything, that might be why you're not having joy. You understand? You still have to be serving Christ to get that joy. If you are, then realize the joy is not from the result. It never really is. It's from the satisfaction of knowing I am fulfilling the purpose that Jesus bought me for. And when you can keep that in mind, you don't have to be chained down to a prosperity gospel of God gives us all of these things. Now there is joy, and it's a lot more fun to win than to lose, right? Believe me, I remember the early years in our softball, and we would get creamed. Just smashed. There was one year that we played, and the team that, I don't know if they won the whole thing or if they got second or what, but they beat us, mercy ruled us 5 innings, 32-1. But don't worry, we got to play them in the tournament then, and they beat us 50-something-1 in 5 innings. Or 2. We scored 2 that time. Mercy rule. It was not good. And we had churches that came up to us and said, you know, we're going to beat them for you. Our motto is going to be Remember Grace Baptist. And it's like, I don't know if I want to be the Alamo in this instance. And then, you know, it felt so much better when a couple years later, after we'd gotten some more experience, and then we played the #1 team in the tournament, and we won in the first round. So much better. We didn't win everything that year. We kind of got happy after that, and then didn't work as well. We still didn't win everything, but we beat them. It was a close game. It was a good game. We had good attitudes, but it was so much more fun when we won. But can I tell you, we still enjoyed playing. We got to laugh at ourselves a little bit in the early days. There's something to be said for getting used to losing. The part where we got to do what we were supposed to be doing was still fun. Softball's a game. You take it too seriously, and then you get all bent out of shape when you lose. When you play it for the intended purpose, you still have fun even in the loss. You have more fun when you win. But when you learn to obey Christ because you're obeying and serving Him, you'll have joy even when you see a ton of casualties. You'll have fun you'll have joy even when you see a ton of things that go bad. Because you know what you're doing is serving Christ. Romans 12:1, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. I ask you today, are you serving Christ? Are you a servant? If you are bought by Christ, are you serving Him? It's not a given. Are you serving Him? We'll be talking more in the Teen Sunday School about service and what it is in other ways, and get some examples in this. But I hope that you got some principles here on what you need to do to serve. How do we normally close? Do we close in prayer, or do we yes, let's close in prayer, and then we'll take up, I believe they take up an Sunday School offering. Is that for Pastor Faulkner? Yes. Okay. So, Matt, after we finish praying, can you take up an offering? Very good. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this day that you've given us, Lord. Would you please just bless this day, Lord? I thank you so much for being the servant and the example in our lives, and I pray you just help us, Lord, to learn to be a servant in our lives, Lord. I pray you'd be with us the rest of this day, and I pray these things in your name. Amen.